I swore I'd never talk about what happened in my classroom. For months, I told myself silence was safer, that if I kept my mouth shut, maybe it would stay contained. But silence doesn't erase the memories, and it doesn't drown out the sound. Even now, I wake up at night to the faint echo of 30 voices chanting together. My name tangled in their rhyme. It was supposed to be harmless. Just a clapping game kids played when they were bored. Some nonsense rhyme passed around the playground like gum wrappers or scary stories. But the thing is, kids shouldn't all know it. Not like this. Not down to the same rhythm, the same rules. The same smile plastered across their faces as they sang. I thought I was being paranoid at first. I thought maybe I was burned out, hearing things I wanted to hear. But I know the difference between children playing pretend and children playing something older. It wasn't a game. It was a ritual, the first time I heard it. I remember freezing mid. My students weren't supposed to know my full name, but when they clapped their hands together and sang it in unison, I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just the sound, it was the way the air in the room shifted. The lights buzzing louder. The tick of the clock stretching like it had to fight to keep moving. When I told them to stop, they smiled at me. The kind of smile that doesn't belong to kids. The kind of smile that says, "We know something you don't." I laughed it off, at least in front of them. Teachers learn to mask fear quickly, but inside, I felt it coil. That cold snake of dread you only get when something is terribly, unnaturally wrong. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? Imagine standing in the break room and admitting, "Hey, my students are chanting my name like they're casting a spell." You'd get reported for burnout before your coffee even cooled. But the truth is, it wasn't just happening in my classroom. I've since found out it's been happening everywhere, in different schools, different towns. Sometimes the rhyme is a little different. Sometimes the names are, but the game itself, the rules, they're always the same. And once your name's been used, it's too late. You think you've never heard it before, but you probably have. Maybe on a playground years ago, maybe from a cousin at a sleepover, maybe whispered in a school hallway when you walked past and didn't notice. But I promise you it's out there. And if you've ever heard kids chanting names in places they shouldn't, you already know how this ends. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday, in the middle of my lesson on fractions. It was a Tuesday, the kind that drags its feet. Rain tapped at the windows, the heater clanked like it was coughing up metal, and my students were restless, more energy than focus, more noise than listening. I had fractions on the board, neat little circles sliced into halves and quarters. But no one cared. That was when I first noticed them playing it. At first, it just sounded like kids being kids, clapping hands, giggling, whispering. I was used to the small rebellions that came with teaching, the little distractions. But when I turned to tell them to settle down, the words froze in my throat. They were clapping in perfect unison, palms striking with eerie precision. And instead of the silly, half-forgotten lyrics I remembered from my own childhood, they were singing names, not celebrities. Not classmates. My name. The rhythm was steady, almost mechanical. Baby banana fana. Fofana, only warped, twisted, dragged into something older. My full name rang in their mouths, sharp and deliberate. The syllables pounded into the rhyme like nails into wood. "Where did you hear that?" I asked. I tried to keep my voice light, casual, but it came out cracked and thin. The children stopped all at once, their hands frozen, Then they smiled at me. 30 pairs of small lips curling at the exact same angle, eyes shining with the kind of mischief that isn't playful. "Just a game," one girl said. Her voice was flat, too flat for a child her age. I forced myself to chuckle. "Well, games are for recess. Let's get back to math." They obeyed, or at least pretended to. But the damage was done. For the rest of the lesson, I felt the chant pulsing in the room, like the walls themselves remembered it. Every time I turned my back to write on the board, I was sure I heard them clapping again, softer now, like whispers in rhythm. When I turned, they were silent. That night, I couldn't shake it. I lay in bed, replaying the sound of my name over and over. The way they dragged out the vowels, the way they looked at me when they said it. I remembered being a kid myself, how we'd play nonsense games until the words lost meaning. But this hadn't felt like nonsense. It had felt like recitation. The next day, it happened again. This time during lunch. I caught 3 of them in the corner, knees pressed together, clapping in that same rhythm. My name again, clear as day. Stop that, I snapped. They froze, heads tilting in sync, like they'd been caught stealing. One of the boys had a streak of blood running from his nostril down to his lip. He licked it away without breaking eye contact. Where did you learn this? I demanded. Silence. Just silence, and those smiles. I told myself it was kids being creepy for the sake of it. They'd figured out my full name somehow, maybe from the roster. Maybe overheard from the office, and they were trying to get under my skin. Children could be cruel, and I'd seen stranger little fads sweep through classrooms before. But later that day, when the final bell rang and they all left, I stayed behind to straighten papers. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles heavy after a storm. And from the far end of the hall, faint but clear, I heard it again. The clap, the chant. My name, stretched and repeated. I stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The sound stopped. Back in the classroom, the whiteboard marker I'd left on the desk had rolled to the floor. I bent to pick it up. Hand froze. Written across the board in large, childish handwriting was my name, over and over, filling the space I'd used for fractions. He hadn't heard a single child come back in. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just mischief. Something else had crept into my classroom. Something that had chosen me. And the game was only just beginning. By Thursday, it wasn't just happening in my room. I'd been trying to convince myself it was a prank, maybe a viral TikTok trend, a weird offshoot of the old banana fauna rhyme. Kids loved creepy stuff, right? They swapped urban legends, like trading cards. But then Ms. Chen from down the hall came to find me between classes, her face pale, eyes darting like she was scanning for someone listening. Are your kids doing it too? She whispered. I blinked. Doing what? She swallowed hard. The name game. My stomach dropped. Whose name? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That afternoon, the whole building felt different. The air was heavy, static clinging to my skin like invisible cobwebs. In the hallway, clusters of kids gathered in corners, palms slapping together in the same measured rhythm. Not all of them were even from my class. 5th graders, 4th graders, even a few kindergartners, all murmuring names under their breath. The cadence spread like an infection. At lunch duty, I stood by the cafeteria door and watched as 2 tables of kids clapped slowly, staring across at one another, reciting some unlucky student's full name. That student sat stiff and trembling, eyes wide, lips pressed tight as if he'd been told not to speak. I intervened. That's enough. Eat your lunch. They stopped. Just like that, no backtalk, no groaning. But the looks they gave me made my skin crawl, like they knew I couldn't stop it. By the end of the day, there were reports of headaches, nosebleeds. A girl fainted in the restroom, but when the nurse came, she was already sitting up, smiling, and humming a tune no one recognized. That night, I dreamed of clapping hands, rows and rows of small, pale palms, smacking together in rhythm, echoing down endless hallways. At the center, a shape crouched in the dark, a long figure made of bent elbows and folded hands, grinning with a mouth too wide. It didn't speak, but the chant went on, using my name like a drum beat. I woke up to find my phone on the pillow next to me, screen lit, a new voicemail. No caller ID. When I played it back, all I heard was children's laughter, layered over the slow clap of dozens of tiny hands. By Friday, other teachers were whispering in the break room. Mr. Alvarez, said a boy in his class. Had written a list of every teacher's full name on the whiteboard, with little symbols scrawled next to them. They said it was part of the game, he muttered, rubbing his temples. But one of the names, one of the symbols, it's not even English. It's not anything. Ms. Chen wouldn't come to work. She sent a single text. They used my name. Then nothing. I told myself I had to act like an adult, like a professional, but the game was spreading, and I was running out of rational explanations. During recess, I caught my class in a circle under the oak tree, clapping slowly, eyes closed. My name again. But this time, between the claps, I heard something else. A second name, whispered low, like a breath dragged through teeth. A name I didn't recognize. Stop it, I barked. All of you, stop it right now. They opened their eyes. All at once, there was no guilt there. Just calm. It's your turn, one boy said. I stumbled back. What do you mean? You'll see, a girl said. Her voice had that same flatness as before. You'll see after 3. After 3 what? After 3 claps, another child whispered, and then they all smiled. I broke up the circle, sent them back inside, and tried to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just an elaborate prank, but my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the door open. That evening, when I went to grade papers, I found something slipped between the stacks. A sheet of notebook paper, the edges smudged with graphite. My name written 3 times, underlined, with a little drawing beside it. 2 hands clapping. Beneath, in childish scrawl, after 3, you'll see. My phone buzzed. Another unknown voicemail. This time it was a single child's voice, soft and close to the mic. After 3 claps, your hours. Then the line went dead. I dropped the phone like it burned. I wanted to call the police, the district, somebody. But what would I say? Help, my students are chanting my name like a curse. I locked up my apartment tight that night. But at exactly 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of clapping, slow, deliberate. Right outside my bedroom door, when I opened it, the hallway was empty. The clapping stopped, but the echo lingered, soft and wet, like hands dripping with water, and beneath it all, a whisper, my name drawn out and sung like a promise. By Monday morning, one of my students was gone. Her name was Alana, a quiet girl with freckles and a nervous laugh who always sat near the back of the room. On Friday, I'd watched her friends chant her full name 3 times, the sound bouncing sharp against the windows. She'd looked pale afterward, shaken, but still there. Still herself. Now her desk was empty. Alana's out sick. I asked the class, forcing my voice to stay calm. They stared at me blankly. No one answered. At recess, I asked the office. The secretary flipped through her files with a distracted sigh, then frowned. Alana who? I blinked. Alana Morgan, 5th grade. She's been in my class all year. The secretary shook her head. I don't have anyone by that name on our roster. I laughed nervously, but it came out too high. That's impossible. She's been here every day. Maybe you're thinking of last year's class. But I wasn't. I could still picture her handwriting, small and slanted. I could still hear her soft giggle when she worked with partners. I could still see the way her hands shook after the chant. When I returned to my classroom, her desk was gone. Not empty. Gone. The row had shifted, as if she'd never sat there at all. My students worked silently at their math sheets, heads bowed, pencils scratching. I scanned their faces, searching for recognition, but none of them looked surprised. When I said Alana's name, not one flinched. It was as if she'd never existed. That night, I pulled out my gradebook. Her name was gone from there too, erased neatly, like she'd never been on the list. The space where her assignments should have been was blank, pages smooth and clean. I tore through my drawers, looking for proof tests she'd taken, permission slips she'd signed, drawings she'd doodled during free time. Nothing. Not a shred of her remained. Except in my memory, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the chant, the way her friends had sung her full name, with that eerie precision. My name had been on their lips too, but hers had come first. And now she was gone. On Tuesday, another student vanished. Ethan. The class chanted his name during morning work, voices low but insistent. By lunch, his desk was gone, the papers he'd handed in erased from my stack. By the time I checked the roll, his name was missing too. This time, I didn't bother asking the office. At the end of the day, I stood at the whiteboard with my marker trembling in my hand. "Stop playing that game," I told them. "Whatever it is, it's dangerous. It's hurting people." A little girl near the front raised her hand. "What people?" "Alana, Ethan." The class went still. Then one boy cocked his head, confused. "Who's that?" I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrote the names on the board in big, desperate letters. "Alana, Ethan, do you see these? These were your classmates. They were here, and now they're gone." The kids stared at the board. Then, slowly, the letters began to smear. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, but the marker strokes bled like wet ink until the names dissolved into black streaks. When I looked back at my students, they were smiling. "Those aren't real names," one whispered. My knees nearly gave out. I stayed late that night, long after the halls had emptied. I needed answers. I opened old yearbooks in the library, flipping frantically through pages. My class photos were there, neat rows of children smiling stiffly at the camera, but Alana wasn't in them. Neither was Ethan. I checked older editions, years back, page after page. I saw the same thing, kids grouped together, smiling, except there were gaps. Blank spaces where faces should have been, names missing from captions. When I closed the book, my hands were shaking. Walking back to my room, I heard it again, the chant, echoing faintly down the darkened corridor. Hands clapping in perfect unison, a name spoken between each clap. I followed the sound, heart pounding. It led me to an empty classroom. No students, no teacher, just desks and chairs under the flickering glow of the exit sign. But the sound was still there, a rhythm, steady and certain, vibrating in the air. Then I realized it wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from underneath, from the crawl space, below the school. Deep and muffled like something chanting through the floorboards. I bolted, running until my lungs burned, until I collapsed in my own classroom with the lights on full. That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I sat at my desk and addressed the empty air, as if anyone out there could hear me. "Check your old photos, your yearbooks. Do you remember everyone you should remember? Or are there gaps you can't explain? Because I think this game has been played longer than anyone realizes. And I think the world is full of names that used to belong to people who aren't here anymore. All erased, all forgotten, and my students weren't finished yet. By Wednesday, my nerves were splintering. Every time I walked into the classroom, I half expected to find another desk gone. Another student's name erased from my memory, like chalk washed off in the rain. I tried to tell myself I had control, that I was the adult, that I could end it. I was wrong. It started that morning when I caught 3 of the kids in the back corner, clapping and chanting again. This time, it wasn't one of their classmates. It was me. My full name rolled off their tongues with unnatural precision. Every syllable stretched like a bowstring about to snap. "Stop it," I snapped, striding over, my voice echoing too loud in the room. They froze, palms hovering inches apart, but the air didn't settle. It stayed taut, buzzing, as if the sound had left an afterimage that clung to the walls. I grabbed the nearest desk, rattled it hard. "This isn't funny. Do you understand me? You don't play this game anymore. Ever." That's when one of the smaller girls, Clara, whispered, without lifting her eyes, "We can't stop. If we do, they'll use your name again." The others nodded slowly, like it was a truth they all knew, but weren't supposed to say. My throat went dry. "What do you mean, they?" Silence. Not the guilty kind. Not childish avoidance. It was the silence of kids who had already said too much. Something in me snapped. I was tired of riddles, of whispers, of feeling like the one being taught instead of the one teaching. So when they began to clap again slow, steady, my name on their lips, I did the only thing I could think of. I clapped my hands over theirs and shouted, "Stop it." The sound broke mid-rhyme. For a moment, I felt victorious. The rhythm shattered, the game interrupted, but then the windows screamed. Glass cracked in sharp spiderwebs, the bulbs overhead popped one by one, and the air itself seemed to cave inward. The room filled with a low groan, like the building itself was in pain. One boy collapsed, convulsing against the floor, his heels drumming against the tile. Another screamed until blood trickled from his nose and ears. Papers whipped into the air as though caught in a cyclone, circling above us before shredding into strips mid-dash flight. And all the while, the chant continued not from their mouths anymore, but from the floor beneath us, from the air around us, from someplace too deep to name. My own name echoed and echoed, louder than my heartbeat. "Finish it," Clara shrieked. Her tiny voice was ragged, desperate. "You have to finish it." I didn't understand, but instinct took over. I forced the last syllables out, stumbling through the broken rhyme until the final clap struck. The room went still. The boy on the floor gasped, coughing violently, but he was alive. The bloodied student wiped his nose, trembling. The papers floated down like exhausted birds. My knees buckled, and I grabbed the edge of a desk for support. "What the hell is this?" I whispered. Clara looked up at me, her eyes too old for her face. "It's not a game. It never was." I sat heavily at my desk, trying to catch my breath. The overhead lights buzzed back to life, feeble and flickering. The walls felt thinner somehow, like they'd been scraped raw. "Who taught you this?" I asked. The kids exchanged glances. Finally, one boy shrugged. "No one. It's just always been here. Always." The word dug into me like a splinter. That evening, long after dismissal, I stayed behind to erase the board. My hand froze when I saw what had been written there in pale chalk. Not fractions, not grammar notes, names, my students' names, lined up neatly in a column. Some were underlined once, some twice, a few 3 times, and at the very bottom, written larger than the rest, was mine, underlined twice. I rubbed at it until my palm burned, but the chalk wouldn't fade. The names bled into one another, looping and curling until they filled the board completely. When I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the classroom window. For a second, I could have sworn it was clapping. That was when I understood. You couldn't interrupt the game, not without consequences. The chant wasn't just sound, it was a bargain. And the more I fought it, the more it wanted me. By Thursday, I was running on nerves and coffee. My hands shook when I wrote on the board, and I caught myself flinching at every sound, at the scrape of a chair, at the smack of a ruler on a desk, at the faint rhythm of palms clapping that I sometimes swore. I heard even when the room was silent. I needed answers. The kids weren't talking anymore. Not in class, not in the hallways. They worked quietly, obediently, eyes darting to me with a kind of pity I'd never seen from children before. Like they already knew how this story ended, and I was the last one to figure it out, so I went digging. The school library was nearly empty after hours, dust thick on shelves that no one touched anymore. I pulled old yearbooks, scanning through pages, searching for gaps where faces should have been. Every decade I flipped through had them students missing from the photos, erased from captions. Spaces where it looked like the photographer had simply forgotten to focus. But it wasn't forgetfulness. It was editing erasure. I found newspaper clippings too, buried in the archives. Local student missing. Community rallies after child disappearance. And then, nothing. No follow-up, no resolution. In later papers, Those same names weren't mentioned again. It was as if they'd been swallowed whole, not just from the town, but from memory itself. That night, I went online, typing name game into search engines only, brought up party songs and playground rhymes. But if you pushed deeper, if you added chant or curse, or children disappear, the results shifted. Dead threads on old forums, glitched out blog posts with broken images, a single archived Reddit story with no comments. The username deleted. Each one described the same thing: a group of children, a rhyme, a list of names. The rules always emerged in fragments, but they were consistent. The chant must always be finished. Only the living may be named. A name chanted 3 times belongs to them. No one ever explained who they were. I leaned back from my computer, pulse racing. The words burned into my brain. It wasn't just my class. It wasn't just my school. This thing was older, deeper, passed down through playgrounds and whispered in cafeterias, resurfacing every few decades like a sickness that couldn't be cured. The next morning, I confronted Henry, the janitor. He'd worked at the school longer than I'd been alive. A stooped man with a perpetual cigarette smell and eyes that never seemed to blink fast enough. I found him sweeping the hall near the boiler room. "Henry," I said, my voice tight, "you know about the game. Don't tell me you don't." He froze, broom mid-swing. For a long moment, he didn't look at me. Then, slowly, he sighed. "Every generation learns it." My chest tightened. "What do you mean? They pick it up?" "Don't know how, don't know why, but kids always find it, like it finds them." He tapped ash into an empty can. "Every generation loses some, loses." He finally looked at me, and his eyes were wet and red. "The ones who get named 3 times? They don't come back." I felt my knees weaken. "Where do they go?" His broom scraped against the tile. "You don't want to know." I grabbed his arm. "I have to know." Henry's voice dropped to a whisper. "There are things underneath. Things that remember names better than we do. Every clap, every chant, it's a calling. Once you're called enough, you're theirs. They take you down into whatever place they come from, and they wipe the rest away." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. "Why hasn't anyone stopped it?" Henry shook his head. "You can't stop a game older than the walls around us. You can only play along, or stay out of earshot." That night, I sat in my classroom after hours, staring at the chalkboard. My name was there again, this time underlined twice, glowing faintly like embers. I turned off the lights, but the letters still burned in the dark. I tried covering them with my sleeve, but the chalk smeared onto my shirt, staining it black as ash. When I looked back, the letters were still clear, still waiting. At home, I closed every window, stuffed towels under the door, and curled up on my couch. Around midnight, I heard it outside, children chanting. Slow, patient, deliberate, my name between every clap. I ran to the window and yanked back the curtain. The street was empty. No kids, no cars, no sound but the distant hum of the city. Yet the chant was still there, curling through the glass, thick as smoke. I pressed my hands over my ears. It didn't help. When I glanced at the mirror in my hallway, I saw my reflection clapping. I screamed and threw a book at it. The mirror cracked, but my reflection kept going. Clap, clap, clap. That was when I understood what Henry meant. The game wasn't confined to classrooms. It didn't belong to children alone. It belonged to something bigger, older, waiting just beyond our walls. And now it had my name twice. By Friday morning, the classroom didn't feel like mine anymore. I walked in and the air was thick, charged, the way it feels before lightning strikes. The kids sat perfectly still at their desks, hands folded, eyes following me with quiet expectancy. No chatter, no whispering, no scrawled doodles in the margins of their worksheets. Just silence and 30 pairs of eyes. I tried to start the lesson, but the words came out thin, brittle. Open your math books. Page 72. Not a single student moved. Instead, Clara, always Clara, the one who spoke when others wouldn't, tilted her head. It's your turn. My stomach dropped. What? The whole class began clapping slowly, rhythm steady, building like a drum line. My name threaded through their mouths, spoken with eerie precision, each syllable stretched into something ceremonial. The sound filled the room, pressed against my skull until I thought my ears would burst. No, I said, trying to sound firm. Stop this now. But they didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Their small palms struck harder, voices climbing together into a single, seamless chant. My full name. Over and over. I slammed my hand on the desk. Enough. For the first time, the rhythm broke. The clapping stopped mid-beat. The silence that followed was worse, deeper. Every child was staring at me with the same expression: relief. Not fear, not defiance, relief. Clara whispered, "We've been waiting." A boy in the front row leaned forward. "They only wanted you." I staggered back a step, my pulse hammering. "What are you talking about? They can't take all of us, if they take you," another said. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, like he was explaining a math problem. My throat closed. "No," I whispered. "That's not how this works." But the way they looked at me said otherwise. The lights flickered. The walls shuddered like a train was passing beneath us. I felt the floor vibrate, faint but insistent, as if something massive was stirring far below. Then the children began to hum. Not words this time, just a low, droning vibration that made my bones ache. Their faces blurred at the edges, features warping, like heat haze rising off asphalt. I clutched the desk, desperate to hold on to something real. My eyes darted around the room, searching for proof that I wasn't hallucinating, that they were still just kids. But all I saw were 30 small bodies united, eyes dark and unblinking, mouths shaping sounds I couldn't understand. I snapped, "I am your teacher." I shouted, "I am not," but I couldn't finish, because, in the silence that followed, the hum broke into words again. This time, they weren't chanting my name. They were whispering something else. Words that weren't English, weren't anything I knew. Words that made my stomach twist, that tasted like salt and blood in the back of my throat just from hearing them. The lights went out. In the dark, I heard clapping, not from the students anymore, but from the walls, the floor, the air itself. Everywhere, enclosing me. When the lights flickered back on, the children were gone. The desks sat empty, papers still in place, pencils rolling slowly, as if dropped mid-use, and I was alone, my name still echoing in the air, soft and insistent. The bell rang, shrill and ordinary, snapping me back to reality. But the kids didn't come back. The following Monday, I almost didn't come back. I sat in my car in the school parking lot with the engine running, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Part of me hoped the building would be gone, swallowed whole in the night. But it stood there waiting, brick and glass, as ordinary as ever, daring me to step inside. The halls were quiet. Too quiet. No chatter, no footsteps, no lockers slamming. My shoes echoed on the linoleum as I walked to my classroom, and with every step I felt that same pressure in the air, like invisible hands pressing against me. When I opened the door, the children were already there. Every desk filled, every pencil lined up perfectly. They sat in silence, hands folded, eyes on me. They looked both exactly like my students, and nothing like them at all. Clara spoke first. "It's time." I wanted to scream, to run, to barricade myself in the nearest office and call for help. But something inside me snapped instead, some mix of anger and desperation. "No," I said. "This ends now." The clapping began, slow, steady, rising in unison, my name on their lips, pounding in rhythm. My name 3 times, then again, and again, each repetition heavier than the last. The air warped, papers lifted off desks, fluttering like frightened birds. Fluorescent lights flickered, popping one after another, until sparks showered the floor. Desks vibrated, scooting an inch across the tiles as though tugged by unseen hands. I covered my ears, but it didn't matter. The chant wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me, thrumming in my bones, rattling in my teeth. I thought I was finished, that the third round would drag me down like it had the others, but then I remembered what I'd found in the archives. The old name. The one written in faded ink across a newspaper clipping from decades ago, scrawled beside the first report of missing children, a name that had been whispered long before mine. I staggered to the board, grabbed a marker with shaking hands, and wrote it out. The letters felt wrong as I shaped them, jagged and heavy, like my arm was carving rather than writing. And then, with my voice raw, I began to chant. The children froze, their smiles faltered. I shouted the name louder, over and over, until my throat tore. The air cracked. The walls groaned. The floor buckled as if something massive shifted beneath it. Some of the kids fainted, collapsing against their desks. Others screamed, clutching their ears as blood seeped between their fingers. A few chanted with me, their eyes rolling back, their mouths moving faster than mine. The classroom became a storm. Light burst from the ceiling, blinding and hot. Shadows stretched along the walls, climbing higher, clawing at the windows. The smell of salt water filled my lungs until I gagged. I kept chanting. I couldn't stop, and then the shadows broke apart. They shrieked as they split, scattering like smoke. For a heartbeat, the room was empty of sound. But then I saw it. Every desk, every surface, every scrap of paper. My name written again and again, scrawled in childish handwriting. Glowing faintly as though burned into the wood, Clara stood. Her face was pale, streaked with blood from her nose, but her smile was back. "It chose you," she whispered. I stumbled back, heart pounding. No, I broke it. You didn't break it." She tilted her head, eyes shining with something far older than her years. "You fed it. You gave it what it wanted." The children began to clap again, weak, staggering, but still steady. My name rose in their voices, louder and louder, drowning out my protests. I tried to shout over them, tried to scream the forbidden name again, but my voice cracked, lost against the tide of theirs. The floor shook violently. A crack split across the tiles, black water seeping up through the gap. I smelled brine and rot, thick and overwhelming. The last thing I remember was the sound 30 small palms striking in perfect rhythm, my name pounding through the room until it was the only thing that existed, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting at my desk, papers stacked neatly, chalkboard clean. The children were gone, but every desk still bore my name, carved deep into the wood. I don't know if I ever left that classroom. Some days, I wake up in my apartment, coffee brewing, radio humming with the morning news. It feels normal, safe, even. But then I catch it. A faint rhythm beneath the static, like hands clapping in unison, steady and patient. And I know I never really escaped. The children are gone, officially, anyway. Administration claimed it was a scheduling error, that my records were confused, that the stress of teaching must have caused me to misremember the size of my class. They recommended leave, therapy, medication, but I remember their faces, their voices, the way their little palms struck together in perfect rhythm. I remembered the desks disappearing one by one, names erased from every file, and I remember the way my name glowed, brighter each day, underlined 3 times. Now, at night, I hear them outside my window, 30 voices, small and sweet, carrying through the dark. Sometimes they use my name. Sometimes they use others, neighbors, strangers. Once, I swear they used yours. I don't look anymore. I've learned better. But the sound never stops. It follows me down empty hallways. It hides in the shuffle of papers, in the tap of raindrops against glass. Once, while brushing my teeth, I saw my reflection's hands moving out of sync, palms smacking together in silence, while my own hung frozen at my sides. I'm telling you this not because I think it will save me. It's too late for that. I'm telling you because the game spreads. Always has. Always will. Every generation learns it, and every generation loses some. So if you hear it on a playground, in a cafeteria, drifting down a school hallway, when no one's there, don't listen. Don't play. And if they use your name, don't answer, because once they've chanted you 3 times, you're already theirs. And if you don't believe me, check your old yearbooks. See if everyone you remember is still there.